Good morning and welcome to our worship service. Happy Sabbath. This morning we're doing something a little different. I'm bringing to you a presentation that I preached recently in the district, in our Southwest District here in Minnesota. And some have been asking if this would be available online. And so we're bringing it to you today. My message today is entitled The Missing Sapphire. Remember the fourth word of the blue stone. Some years ago on 10 Commandment Sabbath, Pastor Mike Oxtenko presented this subject that I am presenting today. Dwight Nelson saw it and his mouth just about dropped to the floor, he said. He said, could this really be true? And he checked with Richard Davidson, and Dr. Davidson said, yes, this is all solid exegesis. Dwight had never heard it before. And when I heard it, I had a similar reaction, and I wanted to share it with you as well. Dwight Nelson shared it at Pioneer Memorial. And really, the rabbis have been telling this story for centuries. It originally came from Moses, and now it comes from God to Moses to us today. Exodus 24, verses 1 and 2. Then he said to Moses, come up to Yahweh, you and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel, and you shall worship at a distance. Moses alone, however, shall come near to the Lord, to Yahweh. But they shall not come near, nor shall the people come up with him. Now, what had just happened just 4 chapters earlier? 4 chapters earlier, at Mount Sinai, we have that most spectacular display. There was thunder and lightning, and the border around the bottom of the mountain that no one could pass to get close to the mountain. And God thundered from Mount Sinai the 10 words of the 10 commandments. There was thunder, and there was lightning, and there was the first commandment. And then thunder and the second commandment. And the people said, we can't stand this. Moses, you speak to us. And so the 10 commandments were proclaimed just 4 chapters earlier. And now God says, Moses, bring up your leadership team. It consisted of 74 men, Moses and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, and the 70. And so it says in Exodus 24, verse 9 and 10, then Moses went up with Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and the 70 of the elders of Israel. And they saw God, the God of Israel, and under his feet there appeared to be a pavement of sapphire. Hebrew is sapphire, as clear as the sky itself. Have you ever seen a sapphire? Here's a quotation from the web about sapphires. From time immemorial, the allure of sapphires has made them the most popular of all colored gemstones. Even today, sapphires remain America's #1 selling colored gem. Their beauty and mystique continues to enchant buyers from the 4 corners of the globe. The prices for fine quality large sapphires can be higher than diamonds. The highest price ever attained for a sapphire is $48,871 per carat, paid for the 62.02 carat Rockefeller sapphire in 2001. Have you ever seen the Rockefeller sapphire? That stone is about as wide as my little finger. Isn't that magnificent? And notice the color, sky blue. So what's the value of this Rockefeller sapphire at $48,871 per carat? It's valued at $3,030,997.42. Any buyers today? Here's the Logan sapphire. It was a gift to the Smithsonian Institute from Mrs. John A. Logan in 1960. It is the largest sapphire on public display today, and it weighs a whopping 423 carats. This is way too big to wear on a finger. This is a brooch surrounded by diamonds. Or maybe you might like to buy a sapphire on the internet. Here's a page from the internet, from the Natural Sapphire Company. You can go and visit it there. Here's an assortment of sapphires that are available from the Natural Sapphire Company. For the sapphires on this page, you can pay anywhere from $1,700 to $42,800 for that little sapphire up in the upper left. Or you might like to buy this beautiful sapphire, beautiful deep blue color, for just $1,109,600. That's at $16,000 a carat. And that was a few years ago. That same sapphire on the Natural Sapphire Company site now sells for $1,872,450 at $27,000 per carat. And you can buy it today on the internet. It shows you the value of a sapphire. So in Exodus 24, verse 10, the 74 leaders of Israel see the God of Israel seated on a massive slab of sapphire. And it says that it's as clear as the sky itself. As clear as the sky itself. Wouldn't you like to just dive into that picture right now? That's sapphire blue for you. And not only is the sky sapphire blue, but the water is a lighter color of sapphire blue, which we will see in a little bit, the meaning of that. So let's go now to verses 1 to 21, and let's find out a little more about this slab of sapphire that the God of Israel is standing upon. Ezekiel is a young exile among the priests of Israel in Babylon. They've been taken captive by King Nebuchadnezzar. And this was the first vision that was granted to Ezekiel as he was ushered into the very presence of God. Ezekiel 1, verse 1 to 21 tells us that the prophet sees a great cloud of fire from the north, and he sees 4 mighty cherubim in that cloud. And these cherubim are standing in a square with their wings each touching the one next on either side. And underneath each cherubim is a wheel within a wheel. And they make up a mighty chariot that moved without turning. You know, when we drive a vehicle, we turn the steering wheel and the front of the car turns in the direction that we're going. But this is more like a hovercraft. It always faced the same direction. And when it was going this direction, and then it needed to turn to the right, it just started moving in that direction. And it, backwards and forwards or left or right, it didn't turn when it moved. And Ezekiel 1 verse 22 to 28 says, now over the heads of the living beings there was something like an expanse. Now that word in Genesis, it talks about that is a firmament in the sky, the dome of heaven. And Ezekiel sees a firmament like the awesome gleam of crystal spread out over the heads of these cherubim. And there came a voice from above the expanse that was over their heads. Whenever they stood still, they dropped their wings. Now, above the expanse that was over their heads, there was something resembling a throne like sapphire stone, ebon sapphire in appearance. And on that which resembled a throne, high up was a figure with the appearance of a man. Verse 27, then I noticed from the appearance of his loins and upward something like glowing metal that looked like fire all around within it. And from the appearance of his loins and downward, I saw something like fire, and there was a radiance around him. And as the appearance of the rainbow in the clouds on a rainy day, so was the appearance of the surrounding radiance. Such was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of Yahweh. And when I saw it, I fell on my face, and I heard a voice speaking. The other day, when Karen and I were out taking a walk close to sundown, the sky was clear, just like a sapphire. Blue, sky blue, just like a sapphire. And then as the sun went down, it was all gold and glorious around the sun next to that sapphire blue sky. The same colors that Ezekiel was seeing in his vision. Here is this sapphire throne and this wonderful being that looks like a man that's sitting upon that throne with this wonderful glory like fire around it, something like a rainbow on a rainy day. A beautiful picture. This is the throne of God. The sapphire throne of God upon this dome, crystal clear dome, firmament, held up by 4 cherubim who run a wheel, who run on the with a wheel within a wheel. Ezekiel was in the presence of God the Almighty. So upon which, what was God sitting? He was sitting on a throne. And what was the throne made out of? It was made out of sapphire. Then, so we don't miss it, Ezekiel repeats it again in chapter 10, verse 11. Then I looked, and behold, in the expanse that was over the heads of the cherubim, something like a sapphire stone in appearance resembling a throne appeared above them. So let's fill in these blanks here. Exodus 24, verse 9. Under God's feet upon Mount Sinai was something like a pavement of sapphire stone, clear as the sky itself. And then from that internet paragraph, this enduring and most popular color hue of sapphire family comes in a wide range of blue colors. In fact, blue sapphires are thought of as the most desirable and expensive of the entire sapphire family. God is standing upon a translucent slab of blue sapphire. God reigns from a throne of sapphire. Therefore, the sapphire upon Mount Sinai was a visible representation of God's throne. You see how it all fits together? The blue is representing God's throne. So the picture so far, 74 of the leading men of Israel are there on the mountaintop, Mount Sinai. They're eating with awe and drinking in the very presence of God, and yet they're not consumed. And under his feet is a giant slab of sapphire. Now, Exodus 24, verse 12, again. Now, Yahweh said to Moses, see, when you see Lord all in capital letters in the Hebrew, it's God's sacred name, Yahweh. Now, Yahweh said to Moses, come up to me on the mountain and remain there, and I will give you the stone tablets with the law and the commandment which I have written for their instruction. So what is he going to give them? The stone tablets. So he says, now Moses, I want you to come up with me on the mountaintop, leave the rest down there, and I'm going to give you the stone tablets. And what would they become? Those stone tablets would become the 10 Commandments. And what would they be made out of? Well, we would think, as I always thought, he's talking about them being made from the granite stone that's taken from the top of Mount Sinai. Here's the picture. This is the way I always pictured it. There are the 2 tables of granite stone being handed down to Moses on the top of Mount Sinai. That's the way I used to see it, and that's probably the way you saw it too. Now, it's true that there was a second set of stone tablets that Moses himself was to carve out and bring up. And maybe that is what this picture is portraying. But what does it say here in Exodus 24, verse 12? It says, now Yahweh said to Moses, come up to me on the mountain and remain there, and I will give you the tablets of the stone with the law and the commandment which I have written for their instruction. That's what it says in the original. In Hebrew, I will give you the tablets of the stone with the law and the commandment which I have written for their instruction. So what stone is he talking about? So when we look at the original Hebrew, we get a different picture. The tablets of the stone. Now, in Hebrew, that's Lukot ha-Aben. Eben is the stone. Lukot is the tablets of the stone. But there's the ha in the middle. Ha is a particle article that identifies a specific object that has been previously noted. So it's not just the stone tablets. It's not just tablets of stone, as it says in English. It's ha-Aben, the stone that has just been on the reader's mind. Now, which stone has just been on the reader's mind? The sapphire stone upon which God is standing. The sapphire stone that is the throne of God. The sapphire stone that will become the 10 Commandments. In other words, God is saying, I will carve out a piece of my sapphire throne, and I will write upon it with my own finger my divine law for my children, my earth children, to obey. God is saying, I'm going to carve out a very piece of my sapphire throne, and I'm going to write up with my own finger my divine law for my earth children to obey. So God wrote the 10 Commandments upon a piece of his throne, and then he gave it to us. Isn't that a wonderful thought? So the 10 Commandments were carved out of the throne of the eternal God. Now, how long will God's throne last, according to the Bible? Your throne, O God, is forever and ever. which means that the 10 Commandments are as eternal as the throne of God, who's the God who spoke them and wrote them. And Psalm 111, verse 7 says, all his commandments are sure, they stand fast forever and ever, and are done in truth and uprightness. Psalm 89, verse 34 says, my covenant I will not break, nor alter the word that has gone out of my lips. God says he's not going to change the word that has gone out of his lips. And then in Matthew 5, verse 17 and 18, Jesus himself said, do not think that I came to destroy the law of the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For assuredly I say to you, till heaven and earth pass away, one jot or one tittle will by no means pass from the law until all is fulfilled. God's law is as eternal as the heavens or his throne, his sapphire throne is. Back to Exodus 24, verse 10. Then Moses went up with Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel. And they saw the God of Israel, and under his feet there appeared to be a pavement of sapphire as clear as the sky itself. See, there's the heavens. Like the very heavens in clarity is what the New King James Version says. Now put that together with what we just read from Jesus. Till heaven and earth pass away, one jot or one tittle will by no means pass from the law until all is fulfilled. The 10 Commandments were carved on tables of stone as clear and as blue as the sky above, and they will last as long, as Jesus says, as we have heavens over our heads. Sky blue heavens. And how long will that be? Forever. And Jesus wrote them himself. 1 Corinthians 10, verses 1 to 4. For I do not want you to be unaware, brethren, that our fathers were all under the cloud, and they all passed through the sea, and they were all baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea, and they all ate the same spiritual food, and they all drank from the same spiritual drink, for they were drinking from a spiritual rock which followed them, and that rock was Christ. The rock followed them. The pillar of cloud by day followed them. The pillar of fire by night followed them. Israel followed the cloud wherever it went. And now it's talking about following the rock. Christ is the rock. They all drank the same spiritual drink, for they were drinking from a spiritual rock which followed them. And the rock was Christ. He was the watery rock. You remember back to that picture of paradise under that sapphire blue sky? That sapphire, under that sapphire blue sky is the sapphire sea. Jesus is the watery rock. He followed them in the cloud, and he followed them in the pillar of fire, and he followed them in the watery rock. Now, two stories to review what happened with the rock. You remember the first story, Israel was getting thirsty in the desert. They just left Egypt, and there was no water out in the wilderness. And they were angry with Moses for bringing them out of Egypt and bringing them into the desert where they were going to die of thirst. And they were about ready to take Moses' life. And Moses went to God and he said, Lord, what are we going to do? And Yahweh said, don't worry about them. There is a rock that I will show you. Take your rod and you go and do what? You go and you strike that rock. Strike it once, and water will come forth from the rock. And so Moses struck the rock, and water came forth from the rock. And that rock followed them all the time that they were in the wilderness. That's the first story. And then when they were almost to the promised land, the water started to slow in its flowing because they were not going to need it anymore. They were on the borders of the promised land, and they again became angry with Moses because they were going to die of thirst now that there was no water from the rock. And what did God say? He said to Moses, this time, I want you to just speak to the rock. Because once the rock is struck, you don't strike it again. And the sad story was how Moses lost his temper and he struck the rock a second time, ruining the perfect picture that the rock was only to be struck once. And in John 19, verse 34, John himself said that when Jesus was struck with the spear in his side, out flowed blood and what? Water. He is the rock from where the water flows. And he is only to be struck once. Jesus' sacrifice is only once for all. It's not to be repeated. He said that the Holy Spirit will be in us like an artesian well that will spring up and will never be thirsty again. If we believe in Jesus, as we drink water from Jesus, our rock. So Christ was the watery rock. But he was also the blue rock. The sapphire stone was the throne, was his throne, a throne with wheels, as Ezekiel 1, verse 15 to 21 and Daniel 7 to 9 make it clear. God's throne comes in judgment on wheels. Have you noticed that? The truth of the missing sapphire is the truth of the Ten Commandment tablets carved by Christ the rock out of the rock of his throne. Here's the truth of the missing sapphire. A sapphire rock throne from which Christ, the rock, cut out stone tablets and carved into them with his own finger the Ten Commandments that he himself had thundered from atop Mount Sinai, which means that Christ is the very embodiment of the Ten Commandments. When I choose to obey them, I'm choosing to follow him. Jesus is also the sapphire stone. Romans 10, verse 4 says, Christ is the culmination of the law so that there may be righteousness for everyone who believes. Jesus is the perfect embodiment of the law. If you want to know what it means to obey the law, look at Jesus. We have a living representation of the law, no longer written on sapphire stone, but he himself is the living sapphire stone. Christ is the culmination of the law so that there may be righteousness for everyone who believes. His perfect righteousness is put to our account, and then he writes his law in our hearts with his own finger by his Holy Spirit. It's connected with that well of water coming up. He writes his law of love in our hearts. Christ himself gave that law to Moses. Notice this from the book Patriarchs and Prophets, page 366. Amid the awful glory of Sinai, Christ declared in the hearing of all the people the 10 precepts of his Father's law. It was he who gave to Moses the law engraved upon the tables of stone. Christ is the sapphire blue rock. Ever since that moment in Exodus 24, the royal color of sapphire blue has been the color of God's truth and his power. Finally, we want to look at two stories, the stories of two women. Woman number one experienced the almighty power of the blue. Woman number two ignored and forgot the almighty power of the blue. Let's look at woman number one. She had an issue of blood for 12 long years. What should only come once a month kept coming for 12 long years. And she heard of a mighty healer that was coming to her town. And she believed deep down in her heart that he could deliver her. And as a faithful Jew, what would Jesus be wearing as he came to town? He wore tassels on the corners of his robe. In harmony with God's instruction in Numbers 15, verse 37 to 40. Let's take a look. Numbers 15, verse 37 to 40. The Lord also spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the sons of Israel and tell them that they shall make for themselves tassels on the corners of their garments throughout their generations, and that they shall put on the tassel of each corner a cord of blue." Why a cord of blue? Because, verse 39, it shall be a tassel for you to look at and remember all the commandments of Yahweh. The cord of blue reminds you of the sapphire blue stone upon which the Ten Commandments were written, so as to do them and not follow after your own heart and your own eyes, after which you played the harlot, so that you may remember to do all my commandments and to be holy to your God. So they were to put tassels on their garment with a blue cord in the tassel, so that they would remember to be obedient and faithful to the Ten Commandments. So the color of the Ten Commandments was to be woven into their hems, the color blue, to represent obedience to divine law. So the healer comes to town and he's wearing the blue fringe tassels on the corners of his garments, a symbol of the law that he himself spoke and then carved with his own finger on Mount Sinai. He's wearing the blue. And so the woman, as she passes through the crowd that is pressing on Jesus from all sides, she reaches through the forest of arms and legs, and she lunges forward and touches the blue. And Luke tells it this way: she came up behind him and touched the fringe or corner of his cloak, and immediately her hemorrhage stopped. She touched the blue of his garment in the tassel. The fringe, the word fringe there is the identical Greek word in the Septuagint in Numbers 15, verse 38, for the corner of your garments. The blue tassel that is worn by all believers in Israel. And she was healed. When she touched the blue of his tassel, she was healed. She touched the sapphire blue ribbon, as the King James Version says, and power flowed out of the giver of life, who is also the lawgiver. Divine power is unleashed to those who choose to obey. Jesus said, without me, you can do how much? Nothing. But when we put forth our will to obey him, to touch the fringe of his garment, almighty power will come to help us to do that. Well, now, woman number two, she started out to be pure and innocent, but she forgot the law of God. She ignored it and she fell, and she became a very wealthy prostitute lavished with the treasures of those who committed fornication with her. She covered herself with the priestly colors of royalty. Let's look at those priestly colors that this woman covers herself with. There's purple and scarlet and gold and pearls. But one color is left out. If she had remembered that color, she would not be called the mother of harlots. Revelation 17, verse 3-6, and he carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, full of blasphemous names, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was clothed in purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a gold cup full of abominations and of the unclean things of her immorality. There it is. Purple and scarlet, but she's wearing no blue. And on her forehead, a name was written, a mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the witnesses of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered greatly. The missing color. The color that is the perpetual sign of loyalty to God's commandments and character and kingdom, she doesn't wear. Blue. Moreover, it says in Exodus 39, verse 1, from the blue and purple and scarlet material, they made finely woven garments for ministering in the holy place, as well as holy garments, which were for Aaron, just as the Lord had commanded Moses. You notice that the high priest wore purple and scarlet and gold, and yes, even precious stones. But he also wore the blue. So this woman did not wear the blue, which signifies faithfulness to God's 10 commandments and obedience to follow Jesus wherever he leads. And what will be her fate? She will suffer the fate of a priest's daughter who is caught in prostitution. Leviticus 21, verse 9. Also the daughter of any priest, if she profanes herself by harlotry, she profanes her father, she shall be burned with him. And that is exactly what happens to the woman in Revelation 17. And the 10 horns which you saw, and the beast, these will hate the harlot, and will make her desolate and naked, and will eat her flesh, and burn her up with fire. 2 women and 1 color, the color blue. One woman touched it and lived. The other woman forsook it and died. How can any woman or man or church declare that one of those 10 has been changed? The Sabbath changed? It's right in the very center of those 2 sapphire tablets. Sapphire from the throne of God. Someone refusing to wear blue is hoping the world will forget, when the 4th word of the blue stone is remember. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. When you see the blue, remember. The blue stone remains unchanged. Right in the heart of that sacred chest in the Ark of the Covenant, along with Aaron's rod that budded in the pot of manna, the blue stone remains unchanged forever. As long as there are blue heavens above and the blue stone of God's 10 commandments, as long as those heavens last, that blue stone will remain unchanged and unaltered and unimpeachable by any man or any church. It's my desire to be true blue. How about you? May God bless us as we endeavor to remain true blue for Jesus. God bless you, and we'll be back next Sabbath with another message.